all. This is Dr. Mubin Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So my apologies, in the last talk, the same talk, I had music on. So I saw the music option and I said, ooh, music, turn it on. Looks like it was distracting. So I'm going to redo. So if you have watched that video, there is not going to be much new here, but this will be without music. So let's start our discussion. So these are gifts for humanity, and they're continuing even when we are redoing. And here is the study that we're going to talk about. This is the study. This is a Qatar's study, which is hot off the press, printed today, November 2, 2022. It is COVID-19 vaccine protection among children and adolescents in Qatar. That is the discussion. So here is my takeaway. And before we go there, let me just very quickly introduce you to Dr. Bean. There is a link in the description of this video that is for this $67 one-time access to Dr. Bean's another 900 premium lectures, in addition to whatever is here on the YouTube. And there is no recurrence here. There is no hidden fees here. We will not say, well, tomorrow you pay this, etc. And you can refund if you want it. Now, when discussing this study, there will be a time when we will think together that maybe if the children were given Omicron booster, meaning bivalent booster, then the efficacy may have been better. So to answer that question up front, I want to show you this preprint study that came out on October 24, 2022. This is about antibody responses to Omicron BA4, BA5 bivalent mRNA vaccine booster shot. That is the booster. And here is what it looks like. So what they did was they took the serum from people who were given fourth dose booster or fourth dose monovalent. I'm looking here because Kyrie is sitting here right next to my mixer, and I hope she does not click any button over there. So she's over there. All right. So they took these booster doses, or the people who had received the booster doses. And here is what they found in terms of neutralization. First, they saw at 3 to 5 weeks post booster shot, individuals who received a fourth vaccine dose with a bivalent mRNA vaccine targeting BA4 and BA5 had similar neutralizing antibody titers as those receiving a fourth monovalent mRNA vaccine against all SARS-CoV-2 variants tested, including BA4 and 5. So I saw somebody tweeting this to some other doctors and saying, look, these boosters are not even able to produce more antibodies than the monovalent. And that's the point. They will not be able to produce more antibodies for our immune system. Whatever is in the booster, may that be monovalent or bivalent, it is nothing but antigens. So it has its own capacity to produce antibodies that it think are the right amount, and that's about it. So this is not a valid question to say the bivalent booster should produce more antibodies unless the amount of booster is different, or adjuvants are different, or the person's health is different. And here is Kyrie. So that is one. Then if you look at the second part, those who received a fourth monovalent vaccine dose had a slightly higher neutralizing antibody titers than those who received the bivalent vaccine against three related sarbecoviruses, SARS-CoV-1, GD pangolin, and W1V1. So what they're saying is that if the booster was given, then the monovalent actually produced better results against not SARS-CoV-2, but other coronaviruses. So I think we shouldn't care much about that. Let's look at the last part. When given as a fourth dose, a bivalent mRNA vaccine targeting Kyrie turned off the lights. Kyrie, can you stop doing this? So I hope you can still hear me. Kyrie, you need to stop. So, when given as a fourth dose, a bivalent mRNA vaccine targeting Omicron BA4 and 5 and an ancestral SARS-CoV-2 strain did not induce superior neutralizing antibody responses in humans at the time period tested compared to the original monovalent vaccine formulation. This is a very important sentence. What they're saying is bivalent, which is supposed to target better Omicron, is actually not targeting any better for Omicron as compared to the monovalent or wild type vaccine. So, why did I bring this study up? It's a preprint. I brought it up that if during the other study, Qatari study, at some point, our thinking became that, hey, the children should have gotten bivalent vaccine, then they would have been better. That I don't think will be the case. All right. So now this study. So I have gone over the study, looked at it, created a summary. So let's look at that summary together, and then we'll look into these things. I'm going to give you my impression of the study first. Here are the key points that I got. Number one, the efficacy for 5 to 11 or 12 to 17. Sorry, my cat is on this side, so I'm trying to stop her. So 5 to 11 or 12 to 17. That efficacy was below the acceptable range that had been set for vaccine efficacy, and that was 60% and above. These efficacies are all below. That's one. Secondly, in these children, there are about 140,000 children, either vaccinated or unvaccinated. Kyrie, stop. Either vaccinated or unvaccinated. None of them died. There were infections. In 5 to 11, 0 severe, 0 critical, 0 fatal, vaccinated or unvaccinated. This is a very important point, because preventing infection, yes, there is a benefit from long COVID, but even that benefit is a smaller amount. So preventing infection is not really the greatest strength of these vaccines. And I don't think we should expect that either. Preventing or protecting for severe or critical or fatal is important, but here even the unvaccinated children did not encounter that kind of a situation. And you could argue that those who are vaccinated probably had comorbidities and they were vaccinated and were better protected. The second interesting thing that I saw was that in the 12 to 17 cohort, these were about 80,000 children, vaccinated and unvaccinated, half and half. One case of severe COVID in unvaccinated group and one case of critical COVID in vaccinated group. And that's it, no deaths. All fortunate, all good. So there was not really much impact on the unvaccinated children anyways, and then there was some benefit. Now I want to add my comment before we look at the study, and my comment is there are actually cases where the vaccine is interesting and important. For example, when there are people with the comorbidities, for example, they have a compromised immune system, they have suppressed immune system, they have cancers, type 1 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, organ transplants, and so on. So there are cases where there is a legitimate need for vaccine, and even vaccine may not do enough for them. So with this, let's now look at the summary of this talk. So now that I have this in front of me, I want to show you one more thing. There is this chart in this study. That chart shows that as the time goes by, the efficacy declines. So as the age of the child increases, the efficacy declines. As the months since the boosting is done or the vaccination is done, the efficacy declines. So if you see here in the lower B chart, effectiveness of the 30 microgram dose of BioNTech vaccine against Omicron variant infection. So if you see here 51.3, then 41, then 24, then minus 1.7. So with time, the efficacy drops. In the children 5 to 11, the efficacy dropped to nothing within 3 months. So let's look at the, otherwise I'll just recite the whole study to you without any numbers or data. So let's start. So Pfizer-BionTech, Qatari study for 5 to 11 years and 12 to 17 years. The up to 17 year are considered children. So this is 5 to 17 children. 5 to 11 year, there were 18,728 children. 12 to 17, there were about 43,000 children in each cohort. So for example, in the case of 5 to 11, 18,728 vaccinated, 18,728 unvaccinated. That is the total cohort. This was a matched retrospective study. So Qatar has the data for everyone in terms of their vaccination or lack of vaccination, then their infection or lack of infection, and so on. So they run these reports from that database. So it is a matched retrospective study, matched that for each child that was vaccinated and for the duration that during which they were observing the child, they had another unvaccinated child of a similar sex, age, and comorbidities, hopefully not, and for the same duration. So here is what they found. Look at this side first. 5 to 11. Total vaccine overall efficacy 25.7, and this was against Omicron. 25.7. FDA's bar for accepting a vaccine efficacy was 60% and above. So this is 25.7% vaccination efficacy, and the range 95% confidence interval range 10% to 38.6% efficacy. And that's not all. The highest point of the efficacy after the second dose was 49.6%, which became negligible within 3 months. 5 to 11 years, overall efficacy 25.7%, which is really subpar. And then even that goes down to zero within 3 months. They then further divided 5 to 11 into two groups. 5 to 7 group, efficacy 46.3%, and 8 to 11 group, efficacy 16.6%. 16.6%. And they have in their manuscript, they say that their observation is that as the age increases, efficacy decreases. This is happening in children. So 5 to 7, lower age, Kyrie, stop. Lower age, 46.3. 8 to 11, 16.6. I'm sorry, I'm doing this because Kyrie is standing there, ow, and clawing at me. Okay, so this is 5 to 11. 12 to 17. 12 to 17 group, they had divided that group in two, or they had done two studies on that group. One study was to see 12 to 17 pre-Omicron time and the vaccine efficacy, and the other one was 12 to 17 Omicron time and the vaccine efficacy. So overall, Omicron time efficacy in 12 to 17 was 30.6%. 30.6%. 95% confidence interval, 26.9 to 34.1. So way below the FDA's expected vaccine efficacy. Remember, that was the expected efficacy for authorization. They say that this may be lower because these children that were being followed had been vaccinated for some month, meaning the vaccine was efficacy was waning or neutralization was waning. Then they further divided this cohort into years, and 12 to 14 years, efficacy was 35.6%, and 15 to 17, efficacy 20.9%. Once again, as the age increases, the efficacy reduces. Pre-Omicron, 12 to 17, efficacy was 87.6%, and the waning was slower. This is the point where I have already created the context. This is the point where you could say, well, that means maybe they had to give for Omicron a vaccine that was targeted to Omicron. And the answer to that from that preprint study that I showed you is no. The bivalent is not performing any better than monovalent against Omicron. Okay, continuing. So the conclusion by the authors was the following, and I want to give their conclusion so that we can see what they are saying. So they said vaccination in children was associated with modest, rapidly waning protection. Modest, I do not know if we should call it modest. I think we should call it low. But, anyways, they are calling it modest, rapidly waning protection against Omicron infection. Vaccination in adolescents was associated with stronger, more durable protection, perhaps because of the larger antigen dose. The dose difference was 10 microgram for children, 5 to 11, and then 12 to 17 was 30 microgram. But mind you, what are they calling stronger, more durable? They're calling this stronger, 30.6 versus 25.7. The stronger is not really some huge leap. Yes, you could say that against the previous variants it was big, but we do not have the previous variants. We are dealing with Omicron and the next ones. So the stronger immunity is really 36%, 30.6%, not even 36%. Then the question becomes, how about severe, critical, fatal cases? What is the protection there? So interestingly, children have less possibility to become severe. So there were actually no severe, fatal, or critical cases in case of 5 to 11. So there was no study. So look at this. 5 to 11, vaccinated were 18,728. So let's round them and say 19,000. And 19,000 were matched unvaccinated. 5 to 11. In these 19,000 vaccinated, 184 infections occurred. I am not a big fan of looking at infections because these vaccines cannot help against the infection. But anyway, still, there is an exposure to long COVID, so we should look at it. So 184. Then unvaccinated, 284. So percentage difference is 0.98% infections in vaccinated versus 1.32% infections in unvaccinated. But if you see here, no severe, no critical, no fatal, good thing. And same is the case for vaccinated or unvaccinated, 5 to 11. Good. So you tell me, looking at this, do you feel it is interesting to have the vaccination? I maintain my position that those who need the vaccination because of their comorbidities, as I said before, the vaccine should be an option for them. However, I am disappointed at these vaccines that even for those, what kind of a product are we offering which has 25.6 or 30.6 kind of efficacy? Okay, so after 110 days of following up, the cumulative incidence of infection in 5 to 11 was vaccinated individuals, children, 2.1% infections, and unvaccinated 2.4% infections. So NW says, how did they count the unvaccinated? So they did not count vaccinated and then waiting for 2 weeks. They did not count them as unvaccinated. They counted unvaccinated as unvaccinated. They actually have in their tables a separate row item for 2 weeks within the second dose, and they also have a separate row item for before the vaccine. So these are separate. So that part is correct. Now, what do they say here? Effectiveness against symptomatic infections was 36.9%. The number needed to vaccinate, the number, check this one out, the blue part, the number needed to vaccinate to prevent one infection was 333.3. So you give vaccine to 333.3 children, and one infection will be prevented. The incidence rate of vaccine preventable infection was 3.7 cases per 10,000 person week. So this is for 5 to 11. Either part, vaccinated and unvaccinated, didn't become severe, and efficacy was really low, and then that efficacy became nothing within 3 months of the second dose. Now 12 to 17, pre-Omicron study, which kind of from an academic point of view it is interesting to see, or for a comparative point of view it is interesting to see, but generally has less relevance now. So for comparison's sake, for academic sake, pre-Omicron, that is against Delta and other such variants, there were 23,317 children in this group and in this time frame when pre-Omicron variants were present. Vaccinated individuals had 67 infections, and unvaccinated had 523 infections. Once again, no severe, critical, or fatal in vaccinated or unvaccinated. Even when there were 523 infections, zero severe, zero critical, zero fatal, fortunately. After 135 days of cumulative incidence was 0.8% infections in vaccinated versus 4.1% infections in unvaccinated. This is, we are talking pre-Omicron time, where vaccines were actually better effective against deltas and others. Again, if you see here, there was no serious situation. Last part of the talk, Omicron 12 to 17, vaccinated, and Omicron time. So there were total 17,903 children in vaccinated group and unvaccinated group facing Omicron together. There were 2,520 infections in vaccinated, 2,520 in these about 18,000 people, individuals, children. And there were 3,337. So 2,500 versus 3,300. So 3,337 in unvaccinated. Now check this out. In the unvaccinated, there was one child that became severe. Why was the child becoming severe? Did they have any comorbidities? Their data does not show that. I'm sure they know it, but that this study doesn't show it. On the vaccinated side, there was one child that became critical. Again, was that child, did they have any comorbidities? Do not know. No fatalities. Again, good news. So after 195 days of follow-up, cumulative incidence of infection was 15.9% in vaccinated versus 20.7% in unvaccinated. That's it. So it really does not offer, this study, a lot of confidence to be able to say, let's continue to vaccinate children. I think we should think about, let's vaccinate those who are in need of a vaccine. And now let me show you some tables as well that are interesting. So here is the table 1. This is the baseline characteristics of adolescent 12 to 17. So if you see here 12 year, 13 year, 14 years, and as you keep going through this table, you will see that the efficacies will become reduced. Then if you look at this one top here, SARS-CoV-2 infection in adolescent 12 to 17 years of age, pre-Omicron. So here if you see, very few infection in vaccinated versus control had a very high number of infections. But if you look at the study below, 12 to 17 years, Omicron, almost very close to each other. Then this one I already showed. I'll show this again. Effectiveness of 30 microgram dose, that is 12 to 17 years. Pfizer-BionTech vaccine against SARS-CoV-2, pre-Omicron. Here, if you see within 1 month 95.3% efficacy, and then 86.8, and then 72, and then it drops to 28% by fourth month, it rises again at 70.6% for some reason. I think that's a data in Emily. Then if you see the one below, effectiveness of 30 microgram dose of Pfizer-BionTech against Omicron variant infection. And so if you see here, starts with 51.3, then 41.1, then 24.2, then minus 1.7. So that's what they mean, negligible after 3 months. So this is the discussion. Not a very promising data set in terms of the benefit. And because there are no cases of severity in larger numbers to be able to compare them to say what is the benefit, that number is still up in the air. So maybe we'll see more studies in the future, but this is the discussion. This discussion is without the music. It was with Kyrie. So now your options are study with music or study with Kyrie. Kyrie finally left. Okay, so let's quickly see if there is any question and then we stop. And please do me a favor. Please like, subscribe, and share. That is the smallest thing you can do for me. And if you would like to support this work, there are links in the description. You can buy me a coffee. You can use PayPal. You can become part of patrons. I would love it. It's just $5 per month. You can join Substack. You can join Locals. You can join this Dr. Bean channel as well. And there is a link to buy 900 lectures for $67. So you have all those possibilities to get more premium medical lectures as well. Okay, so anything here? Cool. So it looks like we are good. And with this, I would see you tomorrow or day after. I want to do the second study, which was the bivalent vaccine and its efficacy or neutralization capability. So NW says, any data on adverse reactions? No, they do not have. They do not have comorbidity data, and they do not have vaccine or infection injury other than infection and severe. They don't have, for example, long COVID. So with this, thank you very much. Please like, subscribe, and share. That would be the easiest thing to do. And I'll see you tomorrow or day after.